Professor Sen, 9 years ago, we entered this millennium with a sense of hope and optimism. That seems to have changed, whether it's terror redefining the way we live, whether it's an economic outlook changing. How would you describe the first decade of this millennium?
Well, a mixed decade. I mean, you're quite right that terror is very much in our mind. Bombay in November last year is a reminder of what might happen. But you know, when we were entering the decade that's just ending, I mean, that was not quite 9/11, but was just before that. And the forces that unleashed itself then was very much around in the world. Afghanistan was very much under Taliban control, with Al-Qaeda a big force there as far as terrorism goes. The possibility of having a concerted world effort towards encountering global warming had not been entertained. I mean, experts knew that the problem looked very bad, but the public was not concerned very much, but it is now. I think the fact that there's a huge amount of poverty was well known. I think the Millennium Development Goals came at around that time, so it wasn't a bad thing. I was disappointed that the Millennium Declaration, which came in the United Nations just a year before the Millennium Development Goals, had a bigger set of objectives, including democracy and human rights, which were all dropped in the human development, in the Millennium Development Goals. And those were just the economic and social, the simple ones, literacy and longevity and so forth. These are not bad goals, they are important goals, but there's also another bigger picture. So we've been trying to do something around them.
So how would you apply the Amartya Sen idea of justice to this very tricky question?
Well, I don't know how to apply that particular line that I tried to present in the book. I mean, mainly one of my arguments was that you don't try to think about a perfectly just world. I think the theory of justice from Thomas Hobbes onwards, Hobbes, Locke, Kant, Rousseau, on to our contemporary thinkers, John Rawls, Ronald Dworkin, Robert Nozick, David Gautier, they have been too focused on that and too focused on getting the institutions right. What we have to look at, I'll try to argue, is how to remove major injustice in the world. What would be an ideal division of emissions across the world, I think would be a very silly way of proceeding. So one immediate application of what I say in my book, The Idea of Justice, is that don't think of that, but there is a huge injustice in which some countries are threatened with barrier, like in water, like Maldives, parts of Bangladesh, a number of other islands. Some countries are threatened with the possibility of no growth in the future, like Africa. There's a huge problem in reducing the poverty in China, India, Brazil, and so forth, if there are global control. I think we have to think about how to have a less unjust situation, how we can enhance justice in the world. The contract that would emerge would not get us to a perfect division in the world, but don't look for it.
Let me ask you to apply that same principle to perhaps the whole battle with terror we are currently seeing. I mean, there is a belief that terrorists have no human rights. Where would you stand on that?
Oh, I certainly don't take the view that there can be a human being who doesn't have a human right. Okay? I mean, the term has to be redefined for that. Human right is something that belongs to every human being. And
if you applied it to Kasab in 2611?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm not making a point about what to do. I'm personally not a great believer in capital punishment. I've always opposed it. And so I will oppose it in this case too. I'm not in favor of suspected terrorists being waterboarded or tortured.
Tuba.com